Hi there, I'm Savannah Mexto with Mannor Law Group, and I'm excited to welcome you to another webinar Wednesday with esteemed elder law and estate planning attorney, Robert Mannor. On today's webinar, Bob will be discussing long-term care during the coronavirus crisis and how to protect your family and your money. He'll be speaking on some of your most common fears, as well as answers to some of your most pressing questions. Before I pass the torch to Bob, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping details. First, a quick disclaimer, and Bob will probably cover this later on too, but while today's session is going to be educational and informative, it is not legal advice. I encourage you, if you do have pressing questions or if you are looking for advice specific to your situation, please contact us after the webinar, and I will explain a nice, easy way for you to do that later on. Also, today's webinar is recorded. After the webinar is completed, we'll be able to send out a replay. You'll probably get that tomorrow. Now, also, you can share that replay with family and friends. If you have questions during today's webinar, you can put those questions in the chat box. We'll review those questions at the end of the webinar. If we don't get to your question, we will contact you after the webinar. Now, why should you listen to what the folks at Mannor Law Group have to say? So we are nationally recognized and respected elder law and estate planning firm. All three of our attorneys are accredited by the Veterans Administration to assist veterans with claims and appeals. Attorney Bob Mannor is nationally board certified as an elder law attorney by the National Elder Law Foundation. He's one of only 19 attorneys in Michigan to achieve this designation. He is currently on the executive board of the State Bar of Michigan Elder Law and Disability Rights Section and past president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, Michigan chapter. Also, Mannor Law Group has been honored by readers of our local paper as the best or favorite law firm for the last 8 years in a row. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome attorney Bob Mannor.
Hi, folks. Go ahead and get started right now. I want to thank you for coming and welcome you, and hopefully we'll get you some good information today. We've got, these are the basic topics that we're going to cover here. So the topics are going to be what care homes or what nursing homes or other types of facilities have residents with COVID-19 diagnosis. You know, you might have heard in the news, or if you have a loved one in a care facility, then you may wonder or have heard that they have some patients there that have the coronavirus diagnosis. We're going to talk about that, how you can find out, or sometimes it's difficult to find out. Can you visit? You know, a lot of these places have lockdowns, and so we're going to talk about the rules with regard to that. What has changed with regard to the daily activities? You know, what does it look like now? Presumably, if you've been to a care facility, and you have an idea of the activities and how meals are done and all those types of things and how things have changed as a result of everything going on. Can they be discharged? So there's a big question lately as to if you have a loved one that needs round-the-clock care and there's no one to provide that, or that we need more care than we are able to provide, can the nursing home discharge them? And we're going to talk about what the rules are, because those have changed, at least temporarily. And what about the employees? What about how is the staff protected, and are there any rules and protections for them? You know, some frequently asked questions with regard to long-term care as it relates to the virus. And then we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about what you can do to protect yourself, your family, or someone that you love if they may go into a nursing home, either now or in the future. And a lot of folks think it's too late, that once a crisis occurs, there's nothing they can do. They're just going to potentially lose everything, and we're going to talk about why that's not true. And then we're going to talk about what you can do to make sure that your loved one is protected, what you protect yourself if your concerns are about yourself, and what your next steps are with regard to that. So, as Savannah mentioned, I always have a disclaimer. The idea of the disclaimer is simply that this is not, you can't consider this legal advice. Okay, legal advice is when we actually talk to you, talk about your specific circumstances. You shouldn't act on generic advice. That would be like acting on a commercial about a drug prescription. You know, you got to go to the doctor, you got to make sure that there's appropriate circumstances for that. So the bottom line is you shouldn't act on anything without specific legal advice. And as Savannah mentioned, we will have an opportunity to get some legal advice after the presentation is over today. All right, so a big question that a lot of us have had, and we've seen some things in the news, is what places, what care facilities have residents with COVID-19? Does your parents' independent living or your spouse's memory care or assisted living? What about nursing home, rehab centers? Well, how do we know if they have a patient or a resident there that has the virus? And so the idea here and what we need to look at is, well, how do we find out? The state and federal government is not announcing that. They're not giving those details currently. It is required that the licensed facilities report to the local health department. Those are not necessarily public records. So some of the health departments have been giving out information either to the media or to others, but the bottom line is that it's not necessarily required public information. So sometimes we've been relying on media reports as far as what facilities have residents or patients there with coronavirus. And what's interesting about that is that it's probably relatively accurate. Now, I don't know, this was probably a couple of weeks ago already, but I saw one report that every skilled care facility in this particular county had residents with coronavirus, and they said there was a total of 20 residents with coronavirus, and one facility had 10 residents with coronavirus, and there's 19 skilled care facilities in that county. So the math didn't even add up internally on the media report. So I think there's some validity in the media reports, but again, I think at times the reporters are getting conflicting information just like the rest of us. And so there's not honestly a reliable source. I think the best answer is you can certainly watch the media reports, contact the care facility themselves, ask the questions. They should be disclosing that information. They are required to disclose it to the employees, which you're going to see in a minute. So you can actually maybe even discuss it with some of the employees and ask them if they have any residents there or patients there that have coronavirus. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services announced that there is new nursing home reporting requirements. Now that only applies to skilled care, so that is not going to apply to assisted living, memory care, independent living, adult foster care homes, things like that, just the skilled care or rehabs. And they are required to report it to the CDC. If they have residents there, the nursing homes are required to report to the resident representatives, in other words, the family, the new confirmed cases of COVID-19 or onset of 3 or more residents or staff cases of respiratory symptoms within 72 hours. So there's a bunch of new rules come out. We're going to talk about some of them and just how they relate to your specifics. There is a Medicaid letter that came out as a 420 requiring nursing homes to report to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services the number of cases that they have, the protective equipment availability, bed supply, and more requirements were announced on 423. So bottom line is the Department of Health and Human Services in Michigan is getting some of those reports. Again, doesn't mean that we have access to them, but they are being reported to the state. All right, so there are an indication from the governor that there's going to be additional testing available for residents of nursing homes, and nursing homes are to be considered a priority for the distribution of protective equipment. So There's at least that promise out there. A lot of the first part of this presentation is just kind of go through some of the rules that have changed, even if they're just temporarily. And this is the big one that a lot of people are really concerned about, and that is the lockdown and isolation for long-term care facilities. And this was Executive Order 2020-37 that allows for who can actually come into the facility. So if your spouse is there, if your parent is there, your mom is there, can you visit? Well, the facilities have been interpreting this fairly narrowly, and they have been allowing circumstances where somebody, if somebody's on hospice or they're clearly, it might be their last days, certainly allowing that visitation, allowing visitation for some other things. But for the most part, it is difficult to get into the facilities. They're for the most part locked down. And so when I say facility or a long-term care place, what do I mean? Well, the Executive Order 50, 2020-50 applies to nursing homes, home for the aged, adult foster care, and unlicensed assisted living. So even if it's not a licensed facility, so unlicensed assisted living facilities, they all are subject to this executive order. The one that's not is independent living. Now, sometimes it's difficult to understand the difference between independent living and assisted living. Independent living is where you write two checks, one check for room and board and a different check for care. Assisted living is you write one check, it includes room and board and care. In other words, you're hiring one company to provide those services. Independent living, you're paying for room and board. There may be care folks there that you pay, but it's a separate company for care that you're paying. And that's the difference between independent living and assisted living. This is important because under this executive order, independent living is exempt. We're learning recently that some of our clients that are in independent living, that their families are still visiting them and they are still open. Probably they're being more careful about who comes in, but that they are not subject to the lockdown, like the mandatory lockdown, like many of the other care facilities. So just be aware of that. So what does the lockdown mean? What specifically does that look like? Well, the executive order, which we're looking at attaching it. So on this webinar, there is a box off to the side that has some information where you can type in your questions. There's also a place where you can download or look at this executive order. And it's also going to be attached when we send out the replay of this presentation. So it does encourage, or just says to the greatest extent possible, a telemedicine during the lockdown even in the rehab facilities. So even doctor's visits, occupational therapy, physical therapy, social work, counseling, behavioral health, even psych visits. Well, obviously it might be kind of difficult to do physical therapy over the phone or telemedicine. But that is the current, that's what the order says, that they're, to the greatest extent possible, they're actually trying to encourage even the rehab facilities to allow for the telemedicine. It does bar the ombudsman. So often we're working with the long-term care ombudsman's office, which is when we have a concern about a facility and we don't feel that they're following the regulations or the rules properly. We'll often tell folks to call the long-term care ombudsman's office. Well, they have an ability to come in and do an investigation. Right now, under the current executive order, they are barred from in-person visits. Okay, now they're supposed to go back afterwards when they're not barred from in-person visits, and they're supposed to be able to do the investigation over the phone. Sometimes that can be very difficult in dealing with this. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services permits on-site nursing home surveillance visits only for investigations of infection control violations. So even the regular sort of supervision or regulatory investigations at nursing homes are kind of on hold, except for involving infection control violations. Residents are confined to their rooms typically, so this is a little bit different. Their day-to-day activities are going to be a little bit different. A lot of times there's care, there's entertainment, there's different things. There might be activities Right now, everybody's pretty much confined to their rooms. Communal dining has been stopped. Group activities have been canceled. The nursing homes are, and this is under the executive order, so you can sort of be a little bit demanding on this. They're supposed to make efforts to accommodate and contact families and friends through electronic communication. So allow the residents to use FaceTime or Zoom or any of these others. Now, a lot of facilities might be short on that type of equipment, and so there's a number of folks that are providing some unused or extra laptops or tablets, so that those can be used, so that you can have still talk to your loved ones through technology. So okay, so here's some good news on this. This is sometimes, it doesn't seem like this is going to be a big issue, but it can be a big issue, which is, can they kick you out? And it doesn't, a lot of times people say, well, who wouldn't want to get kicked out of a nursing home? Well, that's not the case. Sometimes these nursing homes, first of all, sometimes it's the care that we need, and sometimes that's the environment that is going to be best for the situation, based on the care needs, based on the person, based on their concerns, and if they were somebody that might wander away in a different setting and different things like that. So Executive Order 2020-50 bars evictions or involuntary discharges for non-payment. It does not relieve the resident's obligation to pay. It also permits residents to go home temporarily. So the possibility you're going to see in the frequently asked questions, can I take my mom home? Will she be able to go back afterwards? And according to the executive order, it says that they should be able to be readmitted when the crisis is over, as if the resident had been in the hospital or therapeutic leave. So there are some restrictions to that, but the idea is that is a possibility of bringing mom home, providing care in the home, and then if mom needs to go back or dad needs to go back, that normally you'd have to go start over and get admitted. And under the executive order, it's supposed to be that they should be able to go back as if they were returning from the hospital or some other therapy situation. The executive order also bars evictions and involuntary discharges for non-payment, but did not relieve the residents for obligations to pay. Actually covered that one already. So Michigan sought a waiver. So waivers are the when we want to vary from the standard rules that the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services sets out federally. Each state has an ability to submit a waiver and get approved for that waiver. CMS has approved the Michigan waiver for 1135, and it temporarily suspends prior authorization requirements and extends pre-existing authorization. So what does that mean? Typically, in order to go in for rehab, to get admitted into a rehab facility or nursing home, you had to spend, under traditional Medicare, you had to spend 3 midnights in the hospital. So that has been suspended temporarily. It ensures that no one receiving Medicaid benefits will be terminated during this crisis, subject to a change in eligibility status that would result in a reduction of Medicaid services. So on Medicaid right now, there's all kinds of technical issues and technical problems that could come up where there could be a denial or a denial of services. And under this waiver, there should be a temporary suspension. Nobody should be, if you're already on Medicaid, nobody should be denied because of some technicality or some other issue, at least during the pendency of this executive order. We also think that means that people cannot be cut off of Medicaid for an adverse LOCD decision. So LOCD is level of care determination. So we've gotten a number of calls on this lately, actually, where all of a sudden the nursing homes where somebody had met the medical determination or the level of care determination that said, yes, you're medically eligible to be here. And we've had a few calls lately where somebody had been determined medically eligible to be there, and all of a sudden they're saying, no, they're not medically eligible to be here for whatever reason. And we believe that this order would make it so that they cannot cut somebody off of Medicaid because of that determination. And also that level of care determination can be appealed. And so that's really important to know, that even without this executive order, if that adverse level of care determination decision is made, we can appeal that decision. That's something that my office can help you with. What about the employees? So there are some requirements under the executive order for this protecting the staff. Specifically, best efforts are used to provide protective equipment and hand sanitizer to all employees. Inform employees within 12 hours or ASAP of the presence of COVID-19 affected residents. Notify employees of any change in the CDC recommendations. Employees must stay home if they test positive or have symptoms for COVID-19, and facilities cannot retaliate against staff who stay home because they are sick. Staff reporting that the extreme staff shortages, shortage of personal protective equipment, mandatory 12 to 16-hour shifts, requirements that they work even when they have symptoms, and threats of dismissal if they don't come to work or talk to the media and report. So those things should not be happening under this executive order. There are basically some protections for that. So we want to be aware that there are some legal protections for the employees that are helping care for our loved ones here. A couple of frequently asked questions. Can I get into the facility to see my mother or my father or my spouse? The answer is no, not unless there's an urgent reason, such as end of life or request a compassionate visit. You can ask the nursing home to arrange video conferencing phone calls, and sometimes maybe you've seen on social media where there's communication through a window, and that can be appropriate. Can you take mom home? Can you take dad home? Can you take your spouse home? Well, yes. Again, make sure you're making the right decision, because if you can't care for them at home and they are being cared for in their care facility, then I suggest caution in doing that. Don't just do it without knowing what the next steps are, how you're going to provide that care at home. But yes, you can make that choice, and so you may be able to go back when the crisis is over. All right, next question. How can I find out if my mother's nursing home has COVID-19? Well, there's no list publicly available of which homes have cases of COVID-19. We're hoping that based on the new regulations, there's going to be some more transparency soon, and you should be able to hopefully get that information. The nursing home called and said that my mom was being discharged to another nursing home. Can they do that? And the answer is maybe. Yes, if the reason for being discharged is related to whether or not she had COVID-19. No, not without the right to a hearing, and if it's unrelated to COVID-19 status. Okay, so like I said, we've gotten a number of calls lately where they were trying to move somebody out, and the answer is they can't do that without going through the procedural rights and having a right to a hearing on the issues, which is something that my office can help you with. Okay, it's considered an appeal hearing. We've done a number of those, and we can help you with that if they're trying to kick somebody out inappropriately or too soon. All right, so I'm going to shift gears now. So those were kind of all of the immediate what's going on today, what extra protections, how is life in the care facilities now. I want to shift gears because one of the things that everybody has concerns about is how in the heck are we going to pay for this level of care? And so we want to talk about a few different things here. So we've got Medicare or your insurance. Okay, can Blue Cross pay? Well, Medicare and insurance is going to pay for the maybe hospitalization. It might pay for rehab. It might pay for physical therapy, occupational therapy. Might even pay for room and board for a short period of time during that physical therapy or occupational therapy. But there's going to be a limit to that. Sometimes I'll hear people go home from the hospital, go home from rehab, and they say, and I ask them, well, do you have care for mom? Do you have care for dad at home? And they say, oh, it's going to be fine. They're going to send a nurse in. And what I want people to understand is under Medicare and Blue Cross, typically what that means is once or twice a week for an hour or less, they're going to send in those specialists to do their specialist type things. That doesn't mean that they're going to be there for dad to help him shower, or be there for dad to help him get to the bathroom, or make sure that he doesn't wander away from the house, or make sure that his needs are met, make sure that he's eating or that he has all of the activities of daily living covered. So just because they say that, oh, we're going to provide some additional continuing services, those are going to be specialized services like occupational therapy, physical therapy, nursing, okay? And so a lot of times when somebody's leaving rehab or leaving the hospital, they need more care. If the hospital or rehab says they need 24-hour care, or they need round-the-clock care, or they need care, it's not going to be covered under Medicare and your Blue Cross in most situations, okay? Can you pay for it out of your pocket? Of course, you can pay for it out of your pocket. Long-term care insurance. Well, obviously you would have had to get that before you got sick. You can't get long-term care insurance after you get sick. You also can't get it after a certain age, and you have to look at the expense of it. So just be aware of that, that it's out there. It's generally something for somebody that has not already experienced some need for long-term care or has a background of needing long-term care services. Children or other family, okay? I do occasionally have folks where they've got a family member, a child who's able to assist with paying for that. That's good. One of the things I encourage people to do, because occasionally we'll have families and they're all chipping in and none of them really can afford it, but they're all chipping in and they're paying for mom or dad's care or caregiver or assisted living or whatever, and yet there's still $50,000 or $60,000 in mom or dad's account. And my point is, under the law, really, I think the best advice is to use mom and dad's money first. If we run out of that, then have the kids do it. And here's the reason why. This is really important. Here's the reason why. If the kids start paying for care, a lot of times they're thinking of, oh, but if mom goes into a nursing home, she'll be able to reimburse me for that money that I paid for the caregiver or for these other things or for the lift chair or whatever. And guess what? A lot of times she can't. That's going to break the rules for Medicaid and break the rules for other programs. And so if she pays you, if you pay for a home caregiver or multiple members pay for the home of the family, pay for a home caregiver for 2 years, then mom goes into a nursing home and prior to mom going to the nursing home or right after mom goes to the nursing home, we say, okay, well, we're going to reimburse the family for all that because mom still has $50,000 in her account. Can't do that. That's going to be a violation of the rules. She's going to get penalized for that. So my advice is we actually spend mom and dad's money first and only get the contribution of the kids after that money is depleted. Or, of course, we can look at other programs like veterans benefits, which we're going to talk a little bit about, nursing home benefits, Medicaid, waiver, or PACE. Now, all of those, Medicaid, waiver, and PACE, nursing home, are all part of the Medicaid program. We're going to talk about, a lot of people think that you can't get on Medicaid unless you've lost everything. Well, what we're going to talk about today is there's some sort of hidden parts of the law where if you know how to use those and know how to use those safe harbors, you can protect assets. And so it's not going to be something that you can find on Google. Of course, you can find on Google that you can have a car and you can sort of have a house, but we're going to see how that's not actually entirely true either. There's ways that we can protect money. Okay, there's ways that we can protect assets, and we're going to talk about that. Most of these ways are not self-help approaches, okay? The bottom line is that a lot of people will come into my office and they have Googled and they've researched and they talk to the social workers and things like that. And the bottom line is they say, well, we're going to lose everything, but we get to keep the house. Well, if the possibility is, number one, you don't have to lose everything. And number two, if you don't do things to protect yourself, like hire an experienced Medicaid lawyer or elder law lawyer, then it's also possible that you're going to lose the house, because when they say the house is protected, you're going to see in a minute it's not fully protected. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about these veterans benefits. So these veterans benefits, you're going to see it's for certain veterans that served during a wartime period, and I'll give you those dates. But it can help pay for independent living under certain circumstances. It can pay for assisted living, nursing homes, in-home care, okay? If we're gonna use it to pay a family member, there's gonna be some additional documentation. You're definitely gonna need to consult with an experienced elder law attorney like Mannor Law Group to make sure that we're following the rules if you are paying a family member or paying for in-home care. There's very specific rules when we're paying for in-home care that we wanna make sure that, well, it's not going to interfere with veterans benefits. It could cause you problems later on, especially if you get sick enough where you require Medicaid. So just know that this benefit can help pay for a lot of things. We just have to make sure that you're following the straight and narrow and you're lining things up properly. All right, so what about this program? How do you qualify? Well, you have to serve during a period of war, which I'll show you what those are. You have to serve a total of 90 days of active duty for the federal government. In other words, the National Guard doesn't count unless you were activated by the federal government. Reserves don't count unless you were activated by the federal government, full activation. So you have to have a discharge other than dishonorable. You have to have unreimbursed medical expenses that come close to or exceed your income. So occasionally we'll have people that say, okay, well, I want these veterans benefits, but they get a GM pension and they have Social Security and they've got $4,000 coming in. And then I say, okay, well, do you have money? Are you spending things for a home caregiver? Are you spending money on to provide for care? And the answer is yes. They're spending $1,000 on those things. Well, that's not going to be enough to qualify for the veterans benefit. The unreimbursed medical expenses, including home caregiver or assisted living or independent living or nursing home or paying family members for care, it has to come close to or exceed the amount of your income. Okay, so if they have $4,000 in income, we got to be spending $4,000 or close to $4,000 on the assisted living or the home caregiver or whatever in order to get the reimbursement. And I say, well, how do you spend the whole $4,000? Well, because you're going to get a reimbursement, and you can use the money that you get from the VA to pay for food and other expenses. Okay. There is now an asset limit, which is a pretty hard and fast rule we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about what things you can do to prepare yourself to qualify for veterans benefits in the future. All right, so that's my next thing. As far as assets, what can you keep? Well, you can qualify for this program if you have a house with up to 2 acres, up to $127,000 in other assets. That's for 2020. Now, what does that mean? What if you have a house with 4 acres? Well, the extra 2 acres would count towards the $127,000 in assets, okay? $127,000 could be any type of assets. It could be life insurance, it could be investments, it could be savings, it could be gold bars, whatever it is. But they did do some strict rules recently in 2018 that says you can't give money away in order to qualify, okay? So if you're gonna give money away, if you give money away, it's potentially gonna affect you. There's a whole formula for how it affects you. But the bottom line is you shouldn't plan on giving money away ever. If we're going to try to protect the assets, we got to do it 3 years in advance, okay? So if you say, hey, I like this idea of being eligible for these veterans benefits, you can come see us. We're going to be available to come up with a plan, or we're going to see whether it's appropriate. We're not, just because you say you want a plan to protect your assets, we got to look at it, whether it's appropriate for your circumstances. We've had lots of people that come in and say, I want to protect my assets, and I look at their assets and I look at their situation and I say, it's like going to a doctor, it's not appropriate. If you go to a doctor and you say, I want a prescription, and the doctor says that prescription will not help you, you would hope that doctor's not going to give you that prescription, right? And that's the same thing with us. Sometimes people say, I want to come in and I want to protect my assets. Okay, great. We should look at that, and maybe that's an appropriate answer. We're always going to look at it, make sure it's suitable and appropriate for you. One of the laws they passed is this weird rule about annuities, and some people say, well, what does annuities have to do with veterans benefits? And the answer is there were a bunch of annuity salespeople out there selling annuities, probably in many cases inappropriately, meaning they weren't appropriate for the person, that tied up their money and gave a big commission to the salesperson. And the reason why the VA made a lot of these changes was to try to shut down some of those folks. I know of at least one group out there that was doing that, that's still doing that, even though it's clearly illegal. And now, before they used to say they do it for free, now they say you have to join a membership organization for them to help you with the veterans benefits, okay? I can't see how that's not illegal. I don't understand how they could be doing this and that's not considered illegal, because you should never have to pay somebody to apply for the veterans benefits. And there are folks out there that they used to sell annuities. Now they say they have a membership organization and they will file your veterans benefits for you if you join the membership organization. But that sure sounds a lot like you're paying somebody to help you apply for veterans benefits, which is illegal. So don't do that. All right, can you protect your assets to qualify for veterans benefits? Yes, but legal planning must be completed 3 years prior to applying for benefits, okay? So if you know when you're gonna get sick and you know when you're gonna need assisted living or home care, you put it on your calendar and you come in and see me 3 years in advance. No. The point of that is that, yes, there's planning that can be done to protect you, to protect your assets, to protect the cabin up north, to, to make sure that the things are set up properly, but you got to do it in advance, okay? So that doesn't mean you can't qualify for veterans benefits now. We just have to look at the assets and things like that. But if this is something that's of interest to you and you want to make sure, hey, I have availability for this, the idea is to plan when you don't need it. And that's kind of the planning for everything. That's why you get a will, right? You don't get a will because, well, some people get a will because they think they're going to die tomorrow, but you should get a will before you think you're going to die, right? You should get a will. You should get your legal documents in place. And it's the same thing with veterans benefits, okay? If you think that this is going to be something that you're going to be interested in, you want to protect that cabin up north, you don't want to have to sell that or whatever it is in order to qualify for certain benefit programs, it's something that you have to come in and see us in advance. Now, the other rules for Medicaid and things like that are a little bit more flexible than the veterans benefits, just so you know. All right, I mentioned I'd tell you this. This is the wartime dates. I said that you have to be a wartime veteran to qualify for this program. So you have to have served during one of these period of times. The only one that's a little confusing is Vietnam. And for most veterans, you have to have served between August 5th of 64 and May 7th of 75. However, if you served in Vietnam, boots on the ground in Vietnam, or in the blue water or brown water, then you could qualify even starting in February of 61. Okay, so just be aware of those dates. What is the amount you can receive for a married couple? Where one is a veteran, you can get $22.66 in 2020. Single veteran is $19.12. Surviving spouse of a veteran, $12.30. What if the veteran is healthy and the spouse needs sick? Well, the veteran could qualify for benefits to help pay for the spouse's care. That's $15.01 this year. All right, we're going to switch gears here. We're going to talk about Medicaid. When we talk about Medicaid, there's several programs to help you protect your, to get care. You've got the nursing home benefit. That's going to be in a skilled nursing home. Okay, there's got the My Choice Waiver benefit. And that is in your home, basically, or it could be in an independent living type setting. And then you've got PACE, which is called the Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly. And that's a real interesting and nice program that's all-inclusive. And all of them are required that you qualify for Medicaid. So let's talk about qualifying for Medicaid. So this is the default rules. You're going to see, I'm going to go through this and talk about the default rules, but I always say I should put a big X over this. And the reason why I should put a big X over it is we don't want to follow the default rules, okay? I'll give you an analogy. How many politicians and rich folks do you think follow the default rules when it comes to filing their taxes? Doesn't mean they're breaking the law. It means they have a lawyer, an accountant who makes sure that they structure their things in such a way that they get to keep more of their assets. That's exactly what I'm suggesting that you do when it comes to Medicaid and veterans benefits and some of the other benefits out there, My Choice Waiver, PACE. The law allows you, it is legal for the rich people to protect their money and pay less taxes on it. It's also legal for you to protect your assets and protect your cabin and protect your house and protect other assets in a way that you could qualify for these programs. And sometimes when it comes to Medicaid, this is more difficult for veterans benefits. When it comes to Medicaid, we can even do this after the fact, after the crisis has occurred. Your spouse goes into a nursing home, often we can still protect the assets in favor of the healthy spouse, so often 100% of the assets. And you say, okay, well, wait a second, what are you doing? Well, it's legal, the law allows for it. There's safe harbors built in the law, but they're not automatic. Just like when, middle-class folks pay taxes, we're often in the 15 or 25% tax bracket, and you'll see really rich folks that are in pay a much smaller percentage of taxes. Same thing, if you know how to work the law, if you know how to apply the law properly, then you can protect your assets. So that's what I'm suggesting to you, and I'm going to give you a couple suggestions on this. I am going to tell you something though. It's not something you can do on your own. It is not a self-help. It is not a Google. There's no, I've Googled it. There's nowhere on Google that's going to be able to help you protect the assets in the way that an experienced Medicaid and elder law attorney is going to be able to have you do, okay? It does not exist. This is not a do-it-yourself project. There is no LegalZoom for Medicaid. And anybody out there that says that, they've got some snake oil that they're selling you. Annuities, occasionally I'll have annuity people that are selling annuities and they say, this will protect you from Medicaid. That's garbage. It does not protect you from Medicaid, okay? Sometimes annuities will be used as part of a strategy, but it's definitely not something that you do to say, I might someday go into a nursing home, so I'm going to buy an annuity. Nope, that's not going to protect you at all. In fact, it could often hurt you and make you lose the asset if the annuity is not set up properly, okay? So if you got somebody out there saying, don't worry, this is going to protect you, it's not. It's not. There's going to be a case by case. We look at everybody's situation differently. We say, okay, this is what you can do to make sure you're not going to lose everything to the nursing home. All right, but what if you haven't done anything? So that's what this slide is about. This slide is about what if you haven't done anything to protect yourself and you're so stubborn that even when you go into a nursing home, you still don't do anything to protect yourself, okay? And my advice is we get some basic things set up in advance. But even if you haven't had those things set up in advance, if you haven't done any planning at all, often we can still, sometimes we have to go to court and things like that, but often we can still protect assets even after somebody was too stubborn to do planning in advance, okay? Even if they're already in a nursing home. But even if you're in a nursing home and you're still too stubborn to go see a lawyer or a good lawyer, and I don't mean good lawyer in that the other ones aren't good lawyers, I mean a good experienced lawyer that does Medicaid, because most lawyers don't. We are a very, very small part of the population that does Medicaid. And we're kind of a weird group of lawyers that work on Medicaid. It is, we don't fit into the normal population of lawyers for the most part. And so if you don't do anything, you're too stubborn to protect yourself, what are you allowed to keep? Well, here's the list. You can keep your house, sort of. So there's two reasons why they say you can keep your house, but you really can't. One is because if you don't do anything to protect yourself, they can take it after you die, number one. Number two, you got another problem. They only leave you with $2 a day out of your income, out of your pension and Social Security. They're going to leave you with $2 a day or $60 a month out of your income. So how are you going to pay for the upkeep on the house? How are you going to pay for the taxes on the house? How are you going to pay for the mowing the lawn and you're dealing with the snow and whatever? The bottom line is they say you can keep the house, but it's not real, because somebody still has to pay for the house and they're not going to leave you money to do that. And they can, if you don't protect yourself, they can come and take it after you're gone, okay, after you die. Have total, for a single person, a total of $2,000 in total assets. That includes all assets, life insurance policies, money that you have in your mattress, gold bars, if any money that you've hidden. Guess what? What do they call it if you hide money in your house or in your mattress or in your gun safe and then you apply for Medicaid? What do they call that? They call that a felony. I'm serious, it's a felony. Don't do that, especially when there's ways that we can help you protect it. Some people they say they have to do it themselves and they can get themselves into real trouble. Now, are you going to get caught for that felony? I don't know. I just have a generally don't commit any felonies policy in my life, okay? Don't commit any felonies. It's a bad idea. So can you hide assets? Can you give away assets? No, you can't do either of those things. Those are not going to work. Self-help approaches do not work. What else can you keep? You can have one car. Some people say, okay, well, if I can have one car, I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy Dad a really expensive sports car. And that's a really bad idea. Number one is because it's going to lose value immediately. Secondly is I can't guarantee that they're going to accept it. If it's a sports car, if it's not a car that's appropriate to move the person in the nursing home around, in other words, like a van that's modified for wheelchairs or something like that, I think that you're on shaky ground there. Plus, there's better options typically than buying a car. That's rarely an option that we encourage people to do. Prepaid funeral. This is an option we encourage people to do. Okay, you can prepay your funeral. We got to get special documentation for it, but we still got to do that. You can have one life insurance policy. Actually, you can have life insurance policies that have a face value of $1,500 or less. Face value of $1,500 or less. Okay, household goods. You get to keep your jewelry, assuming it's not investment jewelry or investment. If you have an investment, if you have a Picasso hanging on the wall, they may not consider that household goods. Okay. What about everything else? Well, without good planning, you could lose just about everything else. That's why I say we should never all follow these default rules. If we're having to look at Medicaid, if we're going into a nursing home, we want to qualify for My Choice waiver or PACE, or we're going to go into a nursing home, we need to get Medicaid advice right away. Even if you haven't gotten good advice before, even if you haven't gotten proper legal documents before, we can still help you. And it's really important at that point that you get proper advice and don't just go to any lawyer. Okay, if that lawyer doesn't regularly file Medicaid cases, if it isn't the major part of their practice, then I strongly suggest you go to somebody that is very up to date on these rules. The rules change frequently, too frequently. Sometimes every 3 months. The last few, this year, they have, and the end of last year, they started changing the rules without giving us the proper notice. Okay, now they're not supposed to do that, and we're fighting against that, and we're potentially going through the courts and other things. But the bottom line is the state, on a couple of cases recently, they're supposed to give us an opportunity if they want to change the rules to comment and try to just persuade them not to change the rule. The last couple of times they didn't give us that opportunity. They just changed the rules. And so be aware of that, you have to have a lawyer that is very much up to date, that it is a big part of their practice. Yet otherwise, they may not know all of the ins and outs of this. All right, so what can we accomplish? Well, one of the things that we strongly encourage people to do before they get sick or before they need nursing home care is have their estate planning reviewed. One of the things that makes life so much easier if we have these things called extraordinary powers. Most people do not have this language in their legal documents. They don't have this language in their trust. They don't have this language in their powers of attorney. And if you have it, it's going to be so much easier to protect yourself, protect your family, if you have these extraordinary powers. Okay, it's one of the things that we often do. We have somebody come in, they had an excellent estate planning attorney, they don't really want to have any changes at all, they just want to make sure they're protected in case they go to a nursing home. We at least need to add in those extraordinary powers. Okay, so that what the extraordinary powers allow you to do is allows your spouse or your child or somebody that you trust and love to be able to protect your assets at the time that they need to be protected. So if there's a crisis in the future, they would protect their assets then. Okay, you can maybe do it in advance, but we can definitely do it at the time of the crisis. Problem is what? At the time of the crisis, you might not be capable of authorizing this. Okay, you might not be able to come in and say, Bob, I was on this webinar with you and you said we could protect assets from the nursing home. Well, that'd be great if at the time you're in the nursing home you can do that, but by the time you're in the nursing home, you often aren't able to come into my office, either because of dementia or because of a stroke or because of physical restrictions or whatever reason. It's why we have to appoint somebody else to be able to do that for you. Your spouse, your child, your brother, your sister, your loved one, okay? And we strongly recommend that that be put into your documents. And I can tell you the vast majority of the time that language is not in your documents. Okay, so what can we accomplish? Well, typically with a married couple, where one spouse needs care, 24-hour care, home care, PACE, nursing home care, that type of thing, we can protect often up to 100% of the assets in favor of the healthy spouse by maximizing these safe harbors. You'd say, well, if they wrote these safe harbors into the law, why don't they just make it automatic? Why do I have to go to an attorney for that? And the answer is, that's the way the government works. That's the way life works. People that know how to protect themselves and are willing to reach out to the people that are experts in this and that have expert knowledge in this is a better way of saying that, then they can protect themselves. It's the way that rich people pay less taxes. It's the way that we can make sure you don't lose everything if you go into a nursing home. What about a single person? Well, not quite as good, but it's better than the alternative. So with planning, whether it's in advance or after, even after the fact, even after the crisis, we can often protect the house 100%, the car 100%, and 50% of everything else. Now that seems like a bad answer that we could potentially lose up to 50%, but the alternative is we lose everything. We have to spend down to $2,000. Okay, so that's the idea, is that it's best to come in advance and make sure that you're lined up and you have things set up and you have these extraordinary powers. But even if you don't, it might be more difficult, it might be more costly, but we can still often do the planning. Often we have to get a court order or things like that. If we don't have the extraordinary powers, if we don't have proper legal documents in advance, then we often have to go into court and ask permission to do this type of planning. All right, I'm going to give you a quick example here. So this one, we can do it for a married couple, we can do it for a single person, but in this example, I'm going to show you the married couple. We got Sam and Lucy married for 61 years. Lucy has Alzheimer's and Sam has physical restrictions. He has fall risk, he has trouble getting around, things like that. They did all right. They have a modest home, a car, and about $400,000 saved up. So they've done all right. Lucy eventually goes into a nursing home. Sam can't take care of her anymore. They apply for Medicaid, and of course they get denied because they got $400,000. The initial suggestion is what you can reapply once you get down to $100,000. At that point they reapply and they get denied. Okay, so at some point they Sam applies again. Social worker works with them, and they apply again. And this time they get approved. So that's good news. But we've got a couple of issues here. Something called a divestment penalty. So prior to this, Sam was told he couldn't drive anymore. So what do grandpas do? Grandpas often give their car away to their granddaughter or whatever, and he did that. And because of that, they said, well, because you gave your car away, you're going to get a 2-month penalty, and they had to private pay for another 2 months. He also found some paperwork where Lucy's parents had bought her a life insurance policy when she was a baby. Well, that life insurance policy has a face value of $2,000. The life insurance company won't talk to him. He's not even sure where to call. Even if he knew where to call, they wouldn't talk to him because he doesn't have power of attorney. He doesn't have legal ability to talk to her, and Lucy can't get on the phone because she's got Alzheimer's and isn't able to communicate properly. Okay, so they got approved, but it keeps going. After 11 months, you got to reapply for Medicaid coverage. Every year, every 12 months, you got to reapply for Medicaid coverage. So he got approved, subject to a 2-month penalty, and then he gets this redetermination in the mail. Well, by that point, he only has $28,000 left. Started at $400,000 and now down to $28,000 in their joint account. He fills out the form, sends it in. What happens? He gets denied. Why? Because he has a joint account with $28,000 in it. Nobody told Sam that he's not allowed to have that joint account anymore. Sam can have $28,000. Lucy can't. Lucy can only have $2,000. So if Sam had just taken Lucy's name off of the account and had Lucy only have an account that had less than $2,000, he would have been fine. But nobody told him he had to do that. And so guess what? He gets denied. He gets another bill from the nursing home. He pays that. He's down to $8,000. And you know, we still got problems getting approved. Sam neglected his own health and eventually passes away. We're still not approved for Medicaid. We keep getting bills from the nursing home for Lucy. Social worker or somebody applies on behalf of Lucy for Medicaid, they still get denied. Why are they still getting denied now? That life insurance policy. $2,000 face value life insurance policy that Lucy had since she was a baby. Nobody has access to that. Life insurance company won't let them cash it in because we don't have control over Lucy. We don't have the power of attorney, and the balance continues to grow. The alternative, it is this stark of a difference, the alternative. Sam and Lucy are proactive about it. They do some basic things, whether they had a will and a trust before, where they had basic documents. They came into our office, we added those extraordinary powers, we made sure that things were lined up properly for the future. And then when Lucy went into the nursing home, we were able to apply for Medicaid, protect the assets, protect 100% of the assets, $400,000, the house, the life insurance, everything and protected in favor of Sam. Medicaid application approved the first time, nursing home gets paid, Sam has enough money to go to pay for the care and pay for rides to the hospital. That stark of a difference. Losing everything and everything kind of falling apart, or keeping everything in favor of Sam. Okay, that's legal, that's allowed in the law. In fact, there was a Michigan Supreme Court case recently, a couple of years ago, that was unanimously decided in the favor of this. And so this is a distinct possibility. You can't do it without a good, qualified attorney that is experienced in this area of the law. And again, there's only a small, weird group of attorneys that are experienced in this area of the law. Most of the attorneys do all kinds of different practice areas. We do estate planning and what we call elder law, which is Medicaid, veterans benefits, Medicare, all these types of things. Bottom line is what I'm getting in is traditional estate planning is not enough, okay? And so even if you have an excellent estate plan, if you're worried about this, if you want to be prepared for this, anything can happen, then we need to at least take a look at your documents and give you some advice about it. So what should you consider doing? consider making an appointment with us now. And to update your planning to include protecting your assets, or to get advice on an existing care crisis. So basically, I figure there's two groups of people out there that are listening to this. One is that you are just concerned about this for the future and you just want to learn about it. And my suggestion is, let us take a look at your documents and see if we need to add any language to it so that we can make sure that you have the possibility of protecting yourself in the future. Or there's other people on the webinar right now that probably have someone right now that needs home care, that needs assisted living, that needs nursing home. And then we can give you advice about that. We can look at whether there's programs out there that can help pay for that, okay? And even if that's not an issue, if there's more assets than, we have enough money to pay for it, just making sure that things are lined up properly as time goes by, because it doesn't just, yes, we can pay for them now, but what if the wrong spouse dies? What if dad has Alzheimer's and mom's taking care of dad? What if mom dies? Okay, there's specific planning we got to do for that. So if anybody is where they are concerned about the care, even if they're already receiving care in the home or assisted living, nursing home, it's a good idea to get advice, and we can take care of that. In a minute, Savannah is going to tell you how we're going to have an opportunity for you to sort of interview us. It's a free opportunity. It'll take about 15 minutes to interview us, our firm, to get a better idea of what we can do for you and give us an idea of who you are. And then after that, you can decide whether you want to have an appointment with us or not. It allows us, that free 15-minute sort of interview allows us to decide, is this something that we can bring you in, or not, virtually bring you in. We do everything remotely at this point, but talk to you, or whether there's going to be a paid consult. But if there is, if it's going to cost you anything, you're going to know up front, and you're going to have an opportunity to say, okay, what you really need is you need to sit down with Bob for an hour to an hour and a half, go through all of this, and he'll give you advice. And there's gonna be a cost for that, and you would know that. But you'll never have to pay us anything until you know in advance and agree in advance if there's a cost. So the initial step is there's no cost for that, where you're kind of interviewing us to see if this is a good fit, and we're interviewing you to see if it's a good fit. And you'll have an opportunity to schedule that in just a few minutes here. So I'm gonna turn this over to Savannah and see if there's any specific questions that you've written out, and we can answer those, and we're gonna wrap things up.
Hi folks, this is Savannah. I don't see any questions in the chat box. If you do have a question, feel free to list it in the chat box now, or you can always contact us. And later on, I will be showing you how you can contact us. All right, and I don't see any other questions coming through. So thanks again for joining us today on this webinar Wednesday. As Bob mentioned, we do have an easy way for you to get started working with our team. If you're interested in that interview opportunity, check your inbox now, your email inbox. There should be an email there that will have two options. The first option allows you to just very quickly on your own time schedule that meeting. You'll be able to open up a calendar and literally choose the day and time that's convenient for you. You'll meet with Katie over the phone, and through that conversation decide if we're the right law firm for your needs. And the cool thing is that if we're not, we'll actually kind of guide you in the right direction on maybe someone you could contact instead. We also have a button that will allow you to just ask a question to our team. Maybe you're not ready for an interview call. Maybe there's just something that you'd like to know, or you'd like a little bit more information. That'll be the second option, and you'll just hit that button and you'll be taken right to our website, and you can fill out the form that says contact us. We will reach back out to you within 24 business hours after receiving that. There's also an attachment in the email that has information about the executive order that Bob was talking about today. So be sure to download that, which is in the email for you as well. Thank you again for joining. Stay tuned tomorrow for your webinar replay, and be sure to forward that to any family and friends who you feel would benefit from learning this information. Have a great day.